So we've gone from really, excessively dismissive to, in some ways, excessively obsessive and being too involved and not knowing when to kind of set that limit, let our child experience some of the consequences of their own actions, letting them understand that they are capable on their own.
Welcome to Peds Doc Talk TV and this episode of the Peds Doc Talk podcast, where you can catch my amazing conversations with guests on the show here on my YouTube channel, or if you prefer audio only, wherever you access podcasts. I'm Dr. Mona Amin, a board-certified pediatrician, lactation consultant, and mom of two, and I'm here to uplift, support, and guide you so you can raise those incredible kids. Let's get to today's amazing conversation. Today's guest is Zack Kasabo, who is a certified school counselor and parent coach, and he's joining me to talk about how we can encourage positive behaviors in our children without enabling them. Thank you so much for joining me today, Zack.
Thanks for having me on, Mona. I'm excited to talk to you, and hopefully we can provide some value for your audience.
I think so. I started following you recently. You reached out, filled out I have a form for my podcast guests to come on. I do some vetting. I checked out your resources. Love following you. Coach Kasabo on Instagram, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah, I love following you. Your videos are amazing, very balanced, very nuanced. I like it. You really understand children, and that's something that I relate to as well. But if anyone's not familiar with who you are and the work that you do, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. So just thanks again for having me on. My name is Zack Kasabo. I'm a certified school counselor, like you mentioned. I've had the luxury of working with kids from kindergarten to 12th grade over the past 8 years. So one thing that I feel very appreciative of is I have a unique experience where I get to see all the developmental stages. Again, from as young as kindergarten to up to 18 years old. And then throughout my experience, I've worked closely with parents, teachers, and administrators to make sure that we have positive behavior plans in place so that every student has an opportunity to be successful. So that's just a little bit about me. And then I also have a private coaching business where I specialize in helping parents confidently manage their child's challenging behavior.
I love it. And again, we'll attach all of those resources at the end of this episode, as well as in the show notes where you can connect with him. But again, we are talking about encouraging positive behaviors in kids without enabling. And I love that you are a certified school counselor because you're seeing children. I see children in the health aspect. I'm also a mother as well, but we know how it's a triad, right? Parents, pediatricians, and schools are so important, and we are able to see how children react and respond and really be that sort of triad in helping children reach their full potential in terms of behavior or development. And you've talked a lot about how society is unintentionally enabling negative behaviors at times for children. And what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I always like to start by empathizing with with views that might differ from mine. And I think one thing, just to be fair, right now is that current approaches are rooted in good faith. So we're trying to make up for past failures that were dismissive at large. So most people, I think, would agree that parenting practices in the past tended to be dismissive at times. Kids weren't necessarily getting the emotional connection that they craved. You could argue, though, that they still are developing technical competency, but again, they were lacking that emotional intimacy. So we've gone from really, excessively dismissive to, in some ways, excessively obsessive and being too involved and not knowing when to kind of set that limit, let our child experience some of the consequences of their own actions, letting them understand that they are capable on their own. So, as that dynamic has changed, I think, again, rooted in good faith, we've actually encouraged some kids to maybe be too self-indulgent and get lost too much in their thinking instead of just going out into the world and just doing and learning from experience. Yeah.
I relate to that. And I see that a lot on social media. I know you have a presence there as well. It's almost like we're trying to compensate for all that past baggage and do the complete opposite. And in a way, you can enable behavior. It's so funny. It's like you were a fly on our wall last night because my husband and I were chatting exactly about this. We were talking about how we do feel like modern parenting has, in a good way, good faith, I love how you present that, has really gone to the other extreme and not found that gray area of, again, natural consequences, about consequences in general, and also not hovering and just over validating. I know you've spoken about that as well. And I'm curious, you obviously are working heavily in schools. How do you see
Yeah,
this pan out in like a behavior at school, for example?
right. There's a couple things, and I think two overarching themes. One would be more and more kids are displaying lower frustration tolerance,
Hmm.
which is directly linked to the current parenting approaches. And then, and I think what stems from that lower frustration tolerance is just a more generalized anxiety, sense of
Yeah.
anxiety. So those are two generalized themes. Again, for parents listening out there, I don't want to be an alarmist and like pretend like everything's on fire. But these are things that are steadily creeping up as each year progresses. So and again, we can directly see the link between over validating, giving too much grace. Kids need grace, but giving too much grace, and then having a lower frustration tolerance when mom or dad aren't there to kind of swoop in and take over and kind of fix things for them.
Yeah, I agree. And again, this is so already a wonderful conversation, and I'm happy that you're
Yeah,
putting it out there in such a compassionate way. And I think, I talk a lot about social media on my podcast because
yeah,
before I joined the space, I did my job, I talked to families, and then I started seeing all this stuff, like using your example about how children shouldn't be in school and they, when they're upset in school that, they're frustrated at school, that's a sign that they need to be home with the caregiver. I'm like, oh, let's take a step back here. That's not necessarily what that means. Children
yep,
kind of need to learn about different authority figures and how to be in different situations for them to learn how to behave
mhm.
and be in those moments. So in your opinion, what is that key to achieving that balance so that positive behaviors are expected and encouraged without enabling them along the way?
Yeah, right. So I love how you frame that. So kids need love and they need limits. They need
Hmm.
both. Or another way you can think about it is they need empathy and correction. Same idea. So, an overall goal that parents should be trying to achieve with their child is developing a secure attachment. And the simplest way to understand that is that the child has basic trust in themselves and basic trust that other people will help meet their needs when they can't do it themselves.
Hmm.
So, and one way that we accomplish that again is we give them empathy, regardless if their perception is so warped. We meet them where they're at, but then we make sure we help course correct them so that they know that there's certain expectations or to gently challenge that warped perspective so they can become grounded in reality. So again, right now, we are doing an outstanding job as a society empathizing.
Hmm.
Great job. I can say even all the schools that I've worked in, we do a great job letting kids be heard, letting kids be
Yes.
seen. But you could argue sometimes it's to a fault. It's too much, and there isn't that limit or that stop where it's like we've heard you. Now let's talk about what we can do so that you can go explore the world on your own. So it's really it's so for parents listening out there, they need both. Now sometimes you might need a little more love or a little
Yeah.
more limits, but kids need both.
Oh, and it's that middle ground balance that you mentioned. And I think that is such a healthy perspective because like you said, they're going to grow up and they need to know that some things they have to be capable of doing. And you brought up frustration tolerance, and how a lot of parents, I agree, tend to want to overdo and not let their kid be frustrated. Do you see that happening a lot in schools in terms of children not being able to just handle emotions because the parents are over validating and not letting them feel their feelings too much?
Yes. So I think one thing that is a blind spot that can quickly become a blind spot when parents do overvalidate or there's not enough of the correction piece is that what the kids learn is that they're not responsible for their attitude, feelings,
Yes.
behavior because someone else will take responsibility for them. And obviously it's not clearly articulated that way. There's no conversation, but that's what's learned. It's through the repeated feedback loop of I'm upset, I'm frustrated, I'm sad, whatever it might be. Mom comes in, they reassure me, but they never really release me to kind of to figure it not to figure
Yes.
they can help me co-regulate, they can maybe help problem solve, but they never actually like stop and let me do it for myself. So they're not developing that sense of agency. And without that sense of agency, I posted a video on sometimes there's just a sense of learned helplessness is established where it's I can't
Mhm.
do it myself. I need another adult to kind of be there. When my experience has proven day after day after day, kids are capable. They can and they will do it when they have the reassurance and the correction.
Yeah, that learned helplessness is a huge thing, and it's like I can see how this is becoming an issue when we are over validating and empathizing and not providing that for you or for them. What if you could provide an example? Like, let's say we take an example that you've seen in your school system or with a client that you've worked with, if that's possible, and kind of describe how a parent could end up enabling them without even realizing and what we could do instead.
Yeah. So super super simple. If a child has if there's a certain task that's required of a child, it could be anything. Just for this example, packing their lunch for
Yeah.
school. I know that might be a little, and they're start, it's time to do it, and they start to whine and they start to complain, and it's becoming this big reoccurring daily thing. First of all, I always encourage clients and people to look at the structure. So what routines, expectations are in place. So because structure ultimately helps kids manage their behaviors for them, so the parent doesn't have to reactively do it. But in that interaction, if the duration is too long, then ultimately the child expects that I can kind of avoid the situation by negotiating, by debating. And one thing that I want to be clear with parents is that I do believe that kids should have a voice. You don't just want to shut them down, like let them express their feelings, but your job as a parent is to empathize, hold the boundary, and then you have to make a decision. Like you have to make a choice. Either I'm going to disengage, I can disengage by giving them choices, with one of those choices being a consequence that they'll have to endure on their own. I can maybe I don't give them a consequence, but I choose just to walk into the other room,
Yeah.
check back in. So it's little daily interactions, and then those interactions, what I routinely find is they spill over to the other interactions, and it just becomes like this is what I can expect from mom or dad.
Yeah.
I wiggled my way out of this one with the lunch. I can wiggle my way out of turning the TV off when it's time to turn the TV off, and then it just becomes like a blanket, overall perception on mom and dad.
Yeah, there has to be consistency. I mean, again, like the
Mhm.
how we're approaching those situations. And I like that example of like a kid who is able or capable of packing a lunch, and maybe that's the routine that the family send, and then they start to say, "Well, I'm not going to do it," or "I can't do it," and then the family's like, "Well, I don't want to deal with the whining and the protest, so I'm just going to do it for you," and then the child learns, "Well, this is easy. I just don't have to do
Yeah.
it now." I mean,
Yep.
you brought such a small example, but it's a big thing, right? Like we think about all the little minutiae, and I have a 4-year-old, and it's already very obvious, right? I mean, he does it more with my husband in terms of wanting my husband to do things for him. Hey, daddy, feed me. And I look at Ryan and I'm like, sweetie, you know how to eat this. You don't need help today. And it's a balance of understanding their capability, I think, but also, when you know that they're capable, is it that they don't know how to do something and you need to teach them, or is it that they know how to do it and they don't want to do it and they want you to do it
Yes.
for them? And that's a huge thing that I think parents start to fall into the, okay, well, they know how to do it, but it's just easier for me to just do it
Yes.
for them. And
Yep.
I think you would agree with me that that is when we start to get into the slippery slope of just because it's easier for you to do it. I get it. I'm busy. I work 2 jobs. My husband's busy, but I also know that there's certain things that I know my son is capable of and I won't do. And like you said, sometimes it's like, here's your shoes. I know you know how to put them on. You have 5 minutes. I will sit over here. You put them on and then we're going to leave. And if you don't
I
leave,
love
and
it.
if you don't do it, we're going to put your shoes on and I'm going to take you out the door. There's no like, sweetie, do you want to like, what would you like? Do you want me to sit with you and we can choose which shoe? It's sometimes you got to just move and say, like you
Yes.
said,
Yes.
I'm
Yep.
gonna make a consequence for you and make it a point that we gotta go.
Yes.
And I love that. I think that's such a healthy perspective that I think is sometimes lacking in a lot of the large parenting accounts on social.
Yeah. And so there's a theme you said that is very salient, which is that parents need to start trusting their gut
Hmm.
and just learn to be decisive. And if you make a mistake, you can always go back and repair and
Yeah.
try again. But kids feed off of that indecisiveness. So,
Yes.
I talk a lot on my page about practical skills. But if you're not being decisive and confident with the way in which you're delivering them, they're ineffective. Like they pick up on tone, body language. So just like you said, like you're just this is what's going to happen. You don't have to like it. I know it's frustrating, but this is what's going to happen. Like if more parents would just trust that they can do that in
Yeah.
time and expect and a big thing too is expect your child to protest at first. Like if it's not the norm, like expect it. They're going to eventually adapt, and
Yeah.
just hold that boundary. You know, that's another big thing that I am concerned about is that I do feel as though parents are losing trust in themselves just to trust their gut. I'm not sure if you're seeing that too.
I do. And thanks for asking. I do see
Yeah.
that, and that lack of intuition and that lack of
Yes.
looking at their
Yep.
child of like, here is my child, here is what they need, and here is their temperament. And also along the lines of temperament, I do believe sometimes we over blame temperament. Now, don't get me wrong. I think
Yes.
every
Yes.
kid has a different temperament. My daughter and son are very different. Like I see it firsthand. But I also know that just because my son is a little more reactive or a little more strong-willed, and I know hopefully we'll be able to chat about strong-willed children, just because
Yeah.
he's like that, it doesn't mean that I throw the basic principles that we're discussing out the window. It just means that I need to make sure that maybe I need a more firm hand in terms of how I deliver. Maybe I need to be a little more understanding that he may need options when my daughter, when she grows up, may not. But it's really
Hmm.
not losing faith and losing that again, that confidence in parenting. And I attribute this, I'm curious what you think, but I attribute this loss of confidence in parenting to a lot of the noise out there, right? Like if we took away
Yes.
all of
Yeah.
social media, if we took away all of the books out there, which again, I think
Hmm.
there's amazing people like you and myself that I hope can really get this information out there. But if we really took out the multiple people saying different things, or just understanding that there's different options, we could really tap into that intuition and say, you know what? This isn't working for me. Like you said, this isn't working for us. What can I do? What is the root issue here? What is the root personality or thing that the child is dealing with? Is it shame? Is it guilt? Is it this? And how
Hmm.
can we now approach that versus, oh God, now, I've been told that I can't leave the room when they're having a meltdown. And now if I need to do
Yep.
that because that's the only thing that works, now I'm a horrible parent. That is causing so much of these issues, I believe.
100%. So I agree with your whole sentiment 100%. So I think one thing, a big trap that people are falling into is there's this idea if I just swipe a little more, I'm going to find the exact wording or the
Yes.
exact skill that I can plug and play, and that's going to just completely change the course, the trajectory of my child's behavior. When something that you've been kind of you made a point a couple times is that it's all about principles. Like
Hmm.
principles should be guiding your parenting. Like you should be layering skills on top of principles, not the other way around.
Yeah.
So the principles are like the undercurrent structure, undercurrent, the way in which you say the things on top of that. We can play around with those things, but if those things are in place, you're going to be just going back and forth to whatever the flavor of the week is, whatever the current trend is. So 100%, if the noise were canceled out, I think a lot of these things would be corrected, just self-corrected on their own.
Yeah, I used to do a whole series on my show about my principles. I'm sure every
Yeah.
parenting person has their own, and I had my own. Like
Yep.
there were about I think about 10 to 14 of them, and I talked about that. And those principles exactly, those are principles that are going to take you whether your child is a newborn, toddler, teenager, grown adult. Like these are just foundational pieces so that you're always going back to your principles, your roadmap on here is what
Mhm.
I believe in my family. Here is how I'm going to be the sturdy leader of my home. And I think
Mhm.
so much of our generation of parenting is trying to get too caught up in that, well, but this person is saying this, and that's not my
Yep.
principle. But it's going back to stop that noise, figure out your
Yes.
principles, and then
Yes.
look for the people that are feeding into those principles for you, that are helping
Yes.
you support them.
Yep. 100%.
And
Yeah.
so I think I just again I love chatting with you about this, and I
Yeah.
never know what kind of guest I'm going to get until we start recording. And I had to do a little bit of vetting and look at your videos, and I had a feeling that this was going to be a really impactful conversation in terms of helping helping parents feel a little bit more empowered. I hope on how they can approach these situations. What other practical skill can you offer parents to get them started with all of this besides what we've already discussed?
Yeah, so again, start with the principles and the frameworks with structure. Always, 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 and even the things that the skill I'm about to share, you should be trying to redirect your child back into a principle, back into a routine. back into some sort of system that will ultimately help manage their behavior so that you don't have to reactively do it. But my go-to in schools, and something that I know could be very helpful for your parents, I call it corrective validation. So all you do is you give your child a dose of acknowledgement or validation within reason, and then you tell them what they should do instead right now or an
Mm-hmm.
appropriate time for that behavior. So again, we're not going to give license to the negative behavior, but we're going to acknowledge it, and then we're going to encourage a positive replacement behavior instead.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, it's time to turn the screen off. I know you love watching the screen. It's got to, it's time to turn it off. You'll have your screen time tomorrow. So again, just checking in with them really quickly, letting them know that you are emotionally available. So to again, to try to, through reps, build that secure attachment. It's not always dismissive, although there is a
Mm-hmm.
time and a place to kind of shut things down. Absolutely. And then encouraging them to show a positive behavior instead.
And what would be like in that example of the screen time, what would be a positive
Yeah.
behavior for an example for anyone who may be like, what is that? How does that work?
Yeah, you would just literally say you need to turn it off. So
Yeah.
I know you love this game. I know this show. This is one of your favorite shows. I know. I need you. You need to turn the TV off now. And again, uh, trying to use statements instead of questions, and being
Yes.
decisive, and the declarative statements. You need to. It's time to turn the TV off. You can watch it later. Uh, or if it's a big thing too, you could give the choices too. If they don't respond to that, you can choose to turn. You can choose to turn it off, or I'm gonna turn it off for you if you're unable to do that.
Yes.
I'm gonna
Yes.
give you.
Because
I'll give you a couple. I'll give you 15 seconds to think about it, and then I'm
yeah.
gonna turn it off.
So
So
funny.
again, yeah,
We do the same thing in our house. We do a five
yes,
second rule and not a threat. It's never a threat of like
yeah,
you're going to be pulled into a corner. It's you have 5 seconds to decide. Either you're going to walk up the stairs to go to bat time or daddy's going to carry you up. Decide.
yes,
Decide.
yep.
And
You
our
decide.
son, sometimes he cries and he's like, and then we're like, okay, 5 seconds are up. We're going to take you up there. And it's not because you can't expect a child to be like, you
No,
know what? I decided to walk up.
yeah,
Sometimes you got to carry them up the stairs or carry them out of
yes,
the park.
yes,
I
yes,
love it because what you're saying is like, it's true because in that aspect and that example that you gave and I gave is that you are allowing that empathy that you see that they don't want to do it. Obviously, you
right,
recognize them and there's attachment there, but you got to
mhm,
set the boundary and follow through with
yes,
it. Otherwise, they don't look at you as a sturdy leader. They look at you as a
yes,
not authority figure that doesn't follow through, and that's not an
yep.
authority figure. Yeah.
Yep, and then
Oh,
and then once they build that mental map with how they relate to mom or dad, they take that and then they use it with other people in the world too. So it's important to remember that those representations that they learn those encounters with mom and dad. Now,
yeah.
does it can it and does it change? Yeah, sure, but like that's kind of like a framework that they're going to use. And you said something else that really stood out to me, and this is another big trap that parents are falling into is that we're expecting kids to process these situations like they're adults. Like they
Yes.
don't have the life experience to process that it's not like you need to take a bath, you need to go to bed. You can protest, I'm gonna empathize, but this is not a negotiation, you
Yeah.
know? And then I think parents like this is a common here's a common concern that I've experienced with my clients and in schools. I want my child to be able to express themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So so what happens is that they give them this space to express themselves, and they never put the limit on the expression. And
Yes.
what happens in time? It turns into verbal aggression. It turns into physical aggression because they never learn how to appropriately express themselves in positive ways because there's no like this is how you can express yourself. This is what we will tolerate. It's just kind of like a free for all.
Yeah.
Again, it's like too much. It's like the freedom is coming before the responsibility instead of the other way around. You know?
Yeah, and you said that they're not able to process. Let's be honest, even some adults don't know how to do this, right?
I
So how
know.
can we
Yeah.
expect
When I'm overwhelmed, yeah, when I'm overwhelmed, I have a tough time processing sometimes too.
Yeah.
We're
Like,
expecting a
how
little
can you
kid to.
expect my big philosophy here is we tend to hold children to a higher standard than we hold ourselves as adults. And I
Yes.
can say this as
Mhm.
as knowing, when I'm driving and I get honked at for not putting my foot from the or the brake pedal to the gas pedal fast enough. I'm like, everyone needs better emotional regulation as adults. So with children,
Yes.
the work that you're doing and the work I hope that people like you are doing, including myself, is to really teach this sort of living in life. Like, again, you're not going to always get what you want. Things need to move along.
Yep.
You're not going to get this 20-minute emotional validation session all the time. And it doesn't mean that you're not
Yes.
loved. It doesn't mean that we don't
Yes.
care. It means that we're human. We got to move along. I'm not going to sit there with my
Yes.
son for 10 minutes and be like, sweetie, oh my gosh, like, I know. How could that happen to you? It's quick, like you said. It's quick. I
Yes.
see you. It's frustrating. But you know what we're going to do? We got to get out of the park. Like, there's no
Mhm.
hoopla. I think there's so much hoopla because we don't want to see our
Well,
kids mad. Like,
yes. Yes.
I've always said this, and I get a lot of controversy. I say parents fear their tears of their children far too much. They fear the tears so much. It's like
Yes.
they're afraid of their kids crying and their kids being upset. But that's part of learning, right? Like, they got to be
Yes.
upset and cry and not like the boundary for them to learn
Yep.
about it.
Yes.
Oh,
So all great stuff. And two things. Tears are good because that is them starting to accept that they have to let go of beliefs that aren't
yeah.
helping them. So what happens at first is they protest, and protest is how, we show anger to try to control a situation when we feel out of control. And then after that comes the sadness, and that is a good thing. So
Yeah.
that means they, because what sadness helps us do is let go. So letting go of the idea that I get to tell mom every night, no, I'm not taking a bath. Like that you want your child to let go of that idea so that they take a bath when it's time to take a bath. Like
yeah.
it's as simple as that. And then the other piece that is really, really important is that the more that you stop and you process and you therapize, you teach kids to self-obsess. And again, that is where this generalized anxiety is coming from, is there's too much turning inward, and
hmm
expecting a child to be able to go inward and then successfully transition to going outward without like getting stuck. It's
Yeah.
unrealistic. It's not helpful. There's a time and a place. There's a time and a place. Every interaction, absolutely not. You're setting your child up to feel anxious,
Absolutely.
about
I
day-to-day
agree.
concerns.
And you mentioned at the beginning that you don't want to alarm parents and say, well, look at all
Yeah.
this is happening. But listen, I see it too as a pediatrician and managing a lot of these things. I see that there's a higher level of anxiety, a higher level of children not being able to deal with life. And that is a direct reflection of us as parents. And I will say it. I will say it that it is our responsibility. And we cannot blame teachers. We can't blame anybody else. It all starts in the home. And this is not to say that it's easy. This is not to say that, just do that. But a lot of what you said, this is basic things that don't take up our time. Like, you're actually saving people time by not sitting there for an hour and doing this whole production. So I love that you mentioned that. And it's not a blaming thing. It's an accountability thing, that if I want to raise a child who's compassionate, has emotional intelligence, who does this, does that, I got to do the work to get there. This is the
Yes.
biggest job we will ever do. And people
Mhm.
don't look at parenting like that. And I think that's what I think is a huge issue, is that we look at this as, whatever, but it's a human being. Like, you're raising someone whose entire world is how you view them and how you teach them how to view the world and
Yep.
interact with the world. And so, yeah, I relate to this so much, as you can see.
I love that. Well said. Everything, I
I
agree with. I think we're on the same page, which is awesome.
listen, I think
Sometimes
I think we need to start our own podcast.
yeah, so sometimes it is, and as an educator too, I can speak for a lot of my educator friends. We do feel very discouraged, and we do feel defeated because there is this expectation now that we are like the home,
Yes.
like you said, we're never. It is not our responsibility to raise your child. We are
Yeah.
supplemental to the home with very specific things. Academics, as a school counselor, it's I'm not doing therapy. We can talk about like some solutions to problems, but if this is what we're seeing time and time again. Here's my child. Do this for me. It's like this isn't going to work. Like,
Yeah.
they're ultimately going to integrate behaviors based on how they relate to the parent. Period.
Yes.
That's the over. That's what parents need to know.
Well, that was an amazing take home, but is there anything else you'd want to add as a final message for everyone listening today?
Yes. So I just want to go back and just want to just start with the grace piece and the empathy piece. And if you found yourself in one of these traps, which are very easy to get stuck in, one trap being, is there like what's the next best thing that could be a quick fix? Another thing, am I harming my child if I stick to if I follow my intuition? Just have some grace for yourself and just start by just taking responsibility and, accepting your part in the feedback loop. And then tomorrow's a new day. That's it. You're going to just start slowly implementing new things that can disrupt that feedback loop so your child gets what they need. They get the emotional reassurance, but then they also learn that to expect that you are going to they also learn that you are going to expect them to do things on their own.
Beautifully said. I really enjoyed chatting with you. I know I'll have you on again in the future just because I really love talking parenting with people who are balanced and understand and are not afraid to admit when we need to change the ways we parent. And so thank you again. Where can people go for more information, to follow you, and to stay connected?
Awesome. Yeah. So Instagram and TikTok at Coach Casabos, and Facebook is just Casabo Behavior Management, and then my website is www.coachcasabo.com.
Perfect. I will be adding all of that to our show notes so that you can give him a follow and really connect with his resources because, like I said, I just think this kind of information is so important. And thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Let's do it again soon.
Thanks for tuning in. If you love this conversation, make sure to hit that thumbs up sign, share this episode on your social media channels, and subscribe to this channel to stay up to date on all future episodes and our weekly educational videos. Have questions or comments? Make sure to comment below, and I'll see you all next time. Stay well, stay loved, and keep on shining.